Good afternoon. Yes, very, very pleased to be here indeed. I came by slightly more conventional means on the Jubilee line. And apologies for creeping in during the previous speaker's presentation. I hope I didn't interrupt it. Been asked to talk about a vision for urban transport, people and freight, and I'm certainly very much taking my brief to be about London, seeing as that's the organisation I represent and where we are. I thought I would, I've got the technology working. I'll start just by putting some context about the scale of transport in London, what we do, and how we manage it. Every day in this city there are something in the region of 28 million transport trips made. Now, something that tends to surprise people, for all the public transport and the underground and the railways and so on, over 80% of those journeys are made on the road network. They're made in car trips, something around 10 million a day. They're made on the bus, of course, over 6 million bus trips, another 5 million walking trips, 500,000 people cycling, a couple of 100,000 taxi journeys, and nearly all of our freight movement in terms of deliveries and so on, of course, comes on the road network, another 250,000 plus vehicle journeys. All of those vehicles use our network, so they're very intensively used. Not surprisingly, perhaps they're somewhat more intensively used than any other metropolitan conurbation in the country. We reckon about something in the region of 40% more vehicles per kilometre on the roads in London than anywhere else. And, as if that's not more challenging enough, London is of course a growing city. The London Plan, which is the Mayor's long-term strategic land use planning document, predicts that there will be over 1 million more people living in London by 2031, something like 1.25 million actually, and something in the region of 750,000 more jobs, so considerably more economic activity. All of that, of course, is putting more pressure on our transport systems, more demand for movement and so on and so forth. So that's kind of the background against which we need to approach delivering a low carbon transport system across the city. Now the Mayor, indeed London as a whole, indeed the previous Mayor before him, is very committed to achieving that, and London's climate change target is to reduce the city's CO2 emissions by something like 60% by 2025 from a 1990 base level. Now that's 60% of all transport, of all emissions across London. That's not necessarily 60% of transport emissions, and as you can see hopefully by this graph in terms of how those things break down, something in the region of 22% of London's emissions come from ground-based transport of one form or another, the remainder either coming from workplace sources or homes. And it's that 22% that obviously, in my job at Transport for London, we're most particularly interested in. And around 3/4 of that, so around 16% overall, comes in one form or another from road-based travel, either from cars or goods vehicles or public transport-based, and the remainder from rail-based or indeed ground-based aviation and so on. So that's roughly how it splits out, and you can see the major contributions: cars, 46% of that proportion, and HGVs, LGVs, another 18%, and passenger transport, similar sorts of amounts if you add up the rail, the underground, and the buses and so on. So the Mayor's Transport Strategy sets out in particular how Transport for London and other transport agencies across London are going to tackle this challenge as far as the transport sector is concerned, and it focuses around 3 themes: improving the operational efficiency and performance of our transport networks, of vehicles and of systems and the way we operate, supporting and enabling the development of low carbon vehicles, something that I've been talking about a considerable degree today, and promoting more carbon efficient modal choice, modal shift as I think it's generally termed, onto more sustainable transport modes. So I'm going to talk fairly briefly really in terms of what we're doing to achieve that vision in those 3 areas. So taking operational efficiency, and this fits across obviously a range of the services that we provide, particularly from public transport networks through to the road management and freight deliveries and so on. For example, on the underground system, the provision of new trains and so on, automatic train control. As I mentioned earlier, I came on the Jubilee line and I was talking to the managing director the other day of the underground. One of my colleagues whilst travelling on it, he said, "You realise, Garrett, that these trains are now automatically controlled by the computers, so actually they don't speed to the next station as fast as they can, and then every now and again you hear a driver stand up and come on the intercom and say, this train is going to be held here for a couple of minutes while we regulate the service." Actually, the computer controls all that on the Jubilee line now, spaces the trains out so that they don't necessarily go faster than they need to, and then wait. And of course that has an impact in minimising power usage. And there's a whole range of other things, from regenerative braking, improving or reducing the amount of energy loss from conductor rails and things like that. That's all going on. That's all contributing towards reducing the amount of energy that our train systems use, and therefore reducing the amount of carbon that is created in transporting us in increasing numbers around, whether on the underground system or the overground system, and so on. I'm going clockwise around this montage of pictures from the top left. You'll see the next three pictures then are all buses of one shape or another. The first one, which seems to have got rather flattened and widened, is actually a hybrid bus of something like the 8,000 buses that we have in London. Now something over 100 of them actually running on hybrid technology, which is something like 30% more carbon efficient in terms of reduced carbon output than a conventional diesel bus in Euro 5, sort of the highest standards and so on. We'll have 300 of them in service by 2012, over 200 by the end of this year. And then, of course, next picture round you may recognise as the Mayor's new bus for London, which has been prototyped and trialled at the moment, and we'll have 5 of those on the road. The new bus for London also is a hybrid vehicle and is expected to be something in the region of 40% more efficient than a conventional diesel-powered bus. And then the third picture is actually a hydrogen-powered bus, of which we currently have 5 on the RV1 route on the south bank of the river. By the end of the year we'll have 8 running, so we'll have, for the first time ever, we'll have a complete route being run with hydrogen vehicles on a 24-hour all-day basis. And whilst the tailpipe emissions from hydrogen vehicles are obviously zero, even when you consider it well-to-wheel, you're talking about something at least a 50% reduction in CO2 emissions from that sort of technology. Now, clearly, one of the big issues with how fast and how well you roll these technologies out is cost, and I think certainly dependency of the further rollout of hybrid vehicles and the future development of hydrogen-powered vehicles, which are, of course, very expensive indeed, will depend on how fast those technologies can be evolved and developed by the manufacturers, and costs come down as volumes go up. So we're certainly working very closely with the manufacturers, and there's certainly considerable possibilities over the kind of time frames that we've been talking about in the last question, for instance. There are huge possibilities in terms of what you can do to decarbonise public transport and particularly bus transport. Moving around my sort of circle of pictures, one of the things we do is license and regulate taxis, and the Mayor's recently introduced new new age limits for taxis coming in from January 2012, such that black cabs need to be younger than 15 years old, private hire vehicles younger than 10, and all of that, as we go through the cycle of replacement and renewal, will consistently bring down the carbon performance, or improve the carbon performance of the taxi vehicle fleet, and also do considerable things in particular for general air quality, particularly in inner London and central London areas.